Hi everybody, this is Madonna from Mad Bees Quilt and Sew, and it is Monday, so it must be time to work on our sampler again. So today I have my backing ready for you, and I want to show you it because if you remember, that quilt was a 40 by 40 inch quilt, or 41 by 41 inch, whatever you wound up with. And the problem with that is that if you take it to the long arm quilter, it is too small if you use a width of fabric. You're going to need to do one of a few things to it. One, you either need to sew a leader onto it, which is just a piece of fabric that we use to feed it into the long arm machine. And then we're able to start our quilting right at the line where those two pieces meet, which then gives us enough fabric. Or you can have fun like I did, and I used all of my leftover fabrics and I created a quilt back. So I just took all the pieces that I had left over and made them into this new collage. So my quilt really becomes reversible. But I want to go over a couple things with you when you do this. One of the things that I see a lot when people bring in their collage quilts to me is that, you have a leg off the table, is that they wind up where they're using too small of pieces, or that things aren't matching up, okay? So right now I'm going to flip this to the other side to show you a couple things. When you sew together your pieces, I want you to use a full 1/2 inch seam on this, okay? Because what's going to happen is when I press this, it's going to lay a lot flatter. As it gets rolled on the long arm, I'm going to have less chance of it getting twisted and turned. It won't fall up, and I can actually just go up underneath the long arm and feel it and make it flatter. It keeps things much neater for me. The next thing I'm going to show you is I did do piecing down this whole center. But again, I pressed and I used a larger seam width on that. On these little pieces, I didn't worry about it, okay? But on the outside edges, I did. I did not press those open because that's actually going to create more lumpies and more caught ends. By taking this, it makes it really nice and smooth. Lastly, or one of the other things, is make sure your edges are even. So you can see on this side how everything's lining up beautifully. On this edge over here, it does not. This causes a problem when we put it into the long arm if they don't match. I want this to be even so that way it's called squared up. That way it can be fed in nice and neatly into the long arm without it getting caught on anything or your quilt coming up cattywampus. When you measure your quilt back, make sure that you're measuring from this smallest spot. Because if you try to go to this larger one and you need every inch of that backing, you're not going to have enough. So really square it up first. So we're going to pretend that all of this is squared up, but you can see I've nicely pressed this. And now I'm going to get ready for the next step of this. If taking it to the long arm, you would stop here. You would bring in your backing, your batting, and your quilt top and just bring it in just in 3 pieces. Nothing else you need to do. If you're going to quilt at home, here's what I would do next. I would find either a floor or a table that you can tape this down and onto. And I use blue painter's tape, and most of the time when I have to tape, I'm actually taping it to the floor. I have a nice area in my kitchen that I can use, and most of us have tile in our kitchen. It really gives us some nice lines to make sure that things are straight. So it really works out well. So I'm just going to put some tape on these outside edges. And what this is going to do is help this from preventing and shifting as I'm putting other things on it. Now, watch this. Right here where this is open, I put my tape going right across that to make sure that I can keep that open also. Because otherwise, once it's underneath there, you can't really see it. So I add a piece of tape there. I'm going to go across the table and make sure I put one on the other end here, so that way I've got this nice and smoothed out, really nice and flat. But again, I'm worried about and making sure that I leave that pressed open, and that way it's really good to go. I'm going to tape this down about every 8 inches all the way around it. So I would just continue to tape, tape, tape. Then I would find a friend, or I would very carefully put my batting onto it. A trick that's out there that I have seen, I have not done, but I've seen is people will use a pool noodle and they'll roll their batting around the pool noodle, then set it down and roll it out. That works really well. I find that I have pretty good luck with just shaking it out and then just kind of draping it across. I did decide to use 100% cotton batting, and I actually have some friends here today that can help. Look at, oh, hi friend. friend. This is like being in my neighborhood. I have my friends here today. So we're going to pick up and we're going to make sure that we get this right side. So I'm just going to make sure the one side totally matches there. And then I'm going to just set it down. And I'm not going to pull it. I'm not going to torque it. I'm just going to set it down gently. Okay, now I should have probably trimmed this all beforehand, but I'm really happy with the way it looks, okay? There's no big wrinkles, and I'm never going to pull and tug on it. If I need to smooth it out, there's a couple things you can do. Yes, you can use your hand, but one of the easiest things to do is use one of your rulers. Just grab your ruler, start in the center, and just smooth it out. And that way you're not putting any major tension on it. You're just smoothing it out really nicely. And you can see how nice that really just lays it down for us without stretching. If you need to pull on it at all because you've got a big lump in it, never grab and just pull an end. Fold it in half so you've got a double fold to it and then move it. Because that way you're not going to be stretching it out a lot. You've got more durability to it. But you can see, I mean, I'm able to take out that little bit of fullness with using the ruler and not really stretching on anything and making anything real warpy. I do see one little wrinkle over here that I'm not happy with. And I'm pretty sure that that's fabric underneath because I didn't tape it. I'm going to pull this back real gently. And I'm just going to make sure that this is laying flat here. Okay, and we've got one of those open seams there. So guess what? Throw a piece of tape right on that open seam. This to me is the easiest way to make sure that these stay nice and neat for you. But see how that just keeps that down flat? Now I'm much happier with the way that's laying. I can grab my ruler again and just go over the top of it. I've now put my backing and batting together. I'm going to now lay out my quilt top. When I lay it out, I'm not super worried about where that design element was. If you are, you're going to have to do some things to it, okay? If you make it wrong enough, it's going to look right. If you make it absolutely perfect that you want it in the center and you're off by 1/4 of an inch, you're going to notice it. So I kind of have an idea of where it's sitting, but I want to be 4 inches in from the outside edge. When you're home quilting, you only need to be about 2 inches, but you definitely want to make sure you have enough fabric on the outside edge here to be able to hold this all in place for you. I'm going to give it a good shake. And I'm going to follow those same rules that I followed earlier. I'm going to set it down and on there, and I'm going to use my ruler and smooth it out. Start it in the center and come out. Start it in the center and come out. And see how that's just flattening that out so nicely for me? It just really smooths it without me having to be pulling and tugging and tugging and pulling. Look at that. It's just taking that nice little wave right out to the side nice and evenly. I'm going to come right by you. And see, I'm right here. I'm coming from the center. And look, it's just moving all of that right out very nicely without me having to pull and pull and tug and pull.
So if I'm using a Quilter Select ruler, I want to flip it, so I'm using the shiny side. It doesn't have as much,
correct, okay? Yes, you don't want as much traction as the Quilter Select. It doesn't slide as nicely. Whereas this one's just a regular ruler and it just is going to slide all over the place. So now I'm ready to decide how I want to quilt this and how I'm going to secure this. So you have a couple of options. You have the option of doing pinning, which then you want to pin about every fist apart. So I would go through with safety pins and pin pretty much every corner of these squares. They're about the right size for that. Quilting. The rule of thumb on cotton batting is about every 6 to 8 inches you need to have something. So what would I want to do on here? So this is a sampler. Meandering is wonderful on here. A stripe would be awesome. There's nothing that says you couldn't do a checkerboard going across this, you know, doing a vertical and a horizontal, do from corner to corner. I'm a big fan of stitch in the ditch, except for I never stitch in the ditch. I stitch 1/4 of an inch outside of the ditch. I like that technique because then when I'm not perfect, you don't notice it. If you're not perfect in the ditch, then you notice it. We have got this really nice border on here. I would definitely highlight this. So I would be stitching in the ditch here and then stitching on the outside of the ditch here to make that pop up a little bit more. As easy or as hard as you want it to be. I am very fortunate, so I'm going to throw it on the long arm. I have a pattern that's called Simple Feathers, and it's just an all-over feather design just to hold it all in place. It'll probably take on the long arm about an hour and a half or 2 hours to do that, whereas if I sat and stitched in the ditch, it'd be a month or two, because I just am not that excited about doing that. Okay, but how do I start and where do I start? The best thing to do is to get your pinning done, or you can even machine base this. Most of our machines have where we can go as long as 5 millimeters in our stitch, which is an easy one to take out. So if I were going to machine base this into place, I would do the crosshairs. So I would go from north to south and east to west, and I would just hold that in place. And then I would start to quilt it. I might throw something out here in the outside borders, but then again, I'm going to start in the center and quilt out. In the center and quilt out, and in the center and quilt out. I want to make this as easy as I can. And then, you're pretty much done with your quilting. Once you've decided and you've finished your quilting, what I would like you to do then is go around the outside edge and stitch at about 1/4 of an inch all the way around the outside edge. And then next time when I meet with you, we're going to talk about squaring it up and putting your binding on it. So, your homework assignment for this week is backing, batting, quilting. Okay, so you got to get it all lined up, all matched up. Hopefully this tip of doing 1/2 inch wide strips and taping that with it open, your seam open, will help you tremendously in laying that out. That'll make a big difference so you don't wind up with a wobble underneath. So once you've pinned it, you're going to baste, you're going to quilt, or you're going to quickly bring it into me for me to quilt it and baste it and all that kind of stuff. And next week when we meet, we're going to talk about squaring it up, and we're going to talk about how to put on the binding. So we will be in the home stretch after next week. Anything else we need to talk about, Deanna? Any other questions for today?
Well, Cheryl Simmons suggested you write a book.
Oh,
so I told her I love that idea.
I have lots of tips and tricks that, you know what, I just have sewn for forever, so I'm very fortunate that I know lots of them. So
we have a question from Terry. She's wanting to know, can they spray baste also?
Yes. Okay, so spray basting is a method to use. The pro and the con of spray basting is we have 505 here, which I love, okay? It's probably my favorite one. It doesn't stay for very long. So if you know you're going to spray baste, you need to go work on that project in the next day or two, because it goes away after a little while. Be frugal with it, because it will gum up your needle. We do have Schmetz needles that are anti-stick needles. I think that's what they're called.
Non-stick,
non-stick,
yeah.
Not anti-stick, non-stick, whatever. Non-stick needles, they help tremendously going through that, but yes, you can spray baste. Be careful. Right now, I have a lot of extra batting here. Trim that down so you only have what's extra, because then you're not going to be overspraying something that you want to use for another project. It will attract lint, it will attract threads, it will attract a lot of things to it. So just use it frugal. Go outside when you do it so that way your house doesn't stink. But yes, I would definitely go ahead and do that if that's a choice that you have. Watch your seams underneath so that they don't twist and turn on you. And I never spray my quilt, I spray my batting, okay, because I want it to stick to the batting. The one product that I don't care for at all is fusible batting. Now, don't get me wrong, fusible fleece in a tote bag, beautiful. But fusible batting in a quilt is not pretty. When it gets quilted, if it doesn't lay right, you're going to see every pucker and every little tuck, whereas you could have eased that out if you would have had any other type of batting with it.
That was all the questions that they had.
That's it for today. Well, then it is Monday. Have a great day. Tomorrow I am on Comet Sold at 5:15. And what else do we have? Anything else this week? Be a 10 this month. We're going to be talking all about fusibles. So I've been working getting samples ready for that. So if you haven't played with some of the newer products, we've got a brand new one that runs right through your printer. If you haven't tried that, I will give you a little demo and explanation about that. But we've got some fun new things to play with. That's all I know.
I'm sure we'll think of more later.
I'm sure, as soon as I hang up the phone, you know how that is. When you're talking to mom, you hang up the phone, you know exactly what you called her for, okay? So everybody have a very nice week. I will see you tomorrow, and we'll be working on binding next class. Thanks now. Bye now.